Hi everyone, welcome to Recitals in Depth. In today's session, we are going to cover the science and technology based topics of the month of April 2024. So today's session is going to cover multiple themes under science and technology. For example, we have topics under the theme of space, we have topics under the theme of health, we have topics which we are going to cover under the theme of alternate energies, and also we have certain topics which are under the theme of emerging technologies, for example the large language models, AI based topics. Then there are certain miscellaneous and general science based topics. So that's all the thematic coverage that we are going to have in today's recitals session. So let's take a brief look at the index that we have over here. We have very interesting topics to discuss in this particular session. Topics like Geroscience, we have topics with respect to space debris, we have topics with relation to tachyons, which are new particles which the scientists are proposing, topics with respect to black holes, and with respect to certain chemicals like ethylene oxide, which are there in the news for various reasons. We have very interesting topic with respect to pink hydrogen and other such topics. So all these topics we are going to discuss from the perspective of the examination. We're going to see what is the meaning, what are the processes, how to understand that particular topic, but more importantly, from the perspective, what kind of questions can be asked under these topics in the examination, both in the prelims and the mains examination, right? So let's start with the discussion of the first topic. The topic over here is Geroscience, right? And as you can see in the news, this appeared in the news, and the scientists are trying to find out the various reasons behind aging and the age-related diseases. So Geroscience, by the name itself, it shows the science of understanding the aging process, right? And also when we age, the problems which occur are the age-related diseases. For example, diseases like Alzheimer's, diseases like cardiovascular diseases, right? Parkinson's diseases. So all these diseases come up, and to solve those problems which are as of now, we do not have defined solutions for those problems. To solve those problems, the scientists are trying to understand why do we age, what are the various reactions, chemical processes in the body because of which aging happens, and if we catch those, we will be able to solve this problem of age related diseases. And it becomes very important from India's perspective as well, as you would know that almost 11% of the country's population is the elderly population, right? So if such a huge amount of population, almost 150 million people, right, if they are elderly, then definitely we need to take care of them, right? In fact, in the world also we have almost like 12 to 13% of the elderly population, and this is projected to increase to almost like 16 to 17% by 2050. So this problem of elderly, the problem with respect to age-related diseases is going to increase, and that is why this particular topic becomes important. So now let's understand what exactly aging is. In very simple terms, what can be aging? Aging basically, let's say we have a cell, right? So one process would be that the cell starts dying, right? The death of the cell, or it stops replicating. The replication process stops. That's what aging is, right? When the cell growth reduces, when the cell does not replicate anymore, therefore we slowly we start aging. Or maybe this particular cell starts malfunctioning. It does not perform the function as they are considered to be, right? So any of these things can be considered as aging, right? And that is now the scientists are trying to understand what exactly could be the reason behind it. Fine. So let's understand. Let's see what the scientists are saying as a few of the reasons with respect to aging. So these are the few reasons which are mentioned by the scientist. For example, the first reason is the telomere shortening. We will see what exactly is telomere, what exactly is meant by the shortening of the telomere, right? We will see what is the meaning of cellular senescence, right? So this is another keyword which will be important from the exam's perspective. We will have a look at what is the meaning of chronic inflammation, okay, which is also considered one of the reasons why aging happens, one of the reasons why cells, tissues, organs stop functioning properly. We will have a look at the reasons like mitochondrial dysfunction, reasons with respect to DNA and the genomic instability, right? So these are certain reasons which the scientists are saying are behind the aging process. So let's start with the first reason. Let's understand what exactly is the meaning of telomere shortening. Okay, so before understanding this particular thing, let's understand the DNA structure. So as we know, DNA is a double helical structure, right? DNA is a double helical structure. That is something which we all know, right? Now, in this particular diagram of DNA, you can see the ends of DNA. Okay, the ends of DNA, both these strands, the ends of both these strands of DNA. These ends are known as telomeres. Okay, what is the characteristics of this telomere? The characteristics of telomere is, number one, they are the repeated sequence. They are what? They are repeated sequence of nucleotides. All right. For example, at the end of the DNA, so DNA basically has number of nucleotides, A, T, G, C, like that. You know, there's a sequence of nucleotides throughout the DNA, and some of those sequence would form the gene which will code for the protein. That is the basic information we already have. So at the end of DNA, let's say the sequence says that T, T, A, G, G, C, just a random sequence. Let me just assume this particular sequence. Now telomeres, when it comes to telomeres, this sequence will keep on repeating. The next sequence again will be T, T, A, G, G, C. So it's repeating, right? Again, the next sequence will be the same sequence. So telomeres are represented or identified by repeated sequence of the set of nucleotides, right? So that is how we identify telomeres, which are present at the end of the DNA. Okay, that is one thing. Now, what is the use of telomeres? Why exactly do we need telomeres? So the use of telomeres, if we talk about the use of telomeres, then definitely the first use is the protection of the DNA, right? So you have to understand that this particular thing from here to this particular thing, the blue section that you can see, is majorly responsible for the genetic information, majorly responsible for protein coding. Okay, so this telomeres are like caps at the end of the DNA to protect the most important middle section. Okay, so you can assume, you can understand telomeres as the protective covering at the end of the DNA. Okay, that is one thing. The second important function of a telomere is, and these functions could be, you know, the statements in your prelims examination, isn't it? The second important function of telomere is that they ensure that these ends of DNA do not, you know, fuse together unnecessarily. Right? So that is one of the importance, or that is one of the importance of DNA. So unnecessary fusing. They prevent the unnecessary fusing of the DNA ends, right? And that is why they preserve the integrity of the DNA, right? So those are the two major functions of telomeres. Now we have to understand how do they function exactly, what is meant by telomere shortening. Okay, so now let's understand one thing about the DNA replication. So what happens in DNA replication? Ultimately the cell has to replicate, and the replication of cell means basically the replication of DNA, isn't it? There are multiple processes through which DNA replicates. Now, the first thing what happens during DNA replication is that these two strands are going to get separated, right? So the first enzyme which is being used is the helicase enzyme. Now you can simply remember this word helicase, and you can understand that this unfolds the DNA. Okay, that is the only thing. Maybe in some kind of match the following they can ask. Okay, so helicase is the enzyme which is going to unfold the DNA in a Y shape. So a Y shaped fork is being formed. Okay, you can just remember this particular term. A Y shaped fork is being formed when the DNA unfolds. Okay, now the two strands are going to get separated. Right, earlier they had this bond between them, the nucleotides ATGC is having corresponding bonds. Now this bond is being broken and they are getting separated, right? That is what is happening. So now let's assume we have these two as the two strands of DNA. Okay, one would be the leading strand, one would be the lagging strand. Okay, that is something which we can see. So let's say they are two strands, and this dark portion, let's assume they are the telomeres. okay, as we have seen. Now these strands are separate. Now what will happen is that now the DNA has to replicate. Therefore what is the enzyme which will be used? The second enzyme which is being used is the DNA polymerase, which is basically responsible for replicating of DNA polymerase. Okay, so that is the enzyme which is responsible for DNA replication. Now before this enzyme can start acting on the DNA, there is a primer which is required. Okay, there is a primer which is the RNA primer. Okay, a RNA primer is required, which which helps in initiating the replication process. So this RNA primer will go and will attach itself to the end of the DNA. Okay, it will attach itself to the end of the DNA. Now what will happen is that from here on, the DNA polymerase will start acting and it will start replicating over here. Now this particular primer, again this is another enzyme which helps in the creation of this particular primer, and that is known as primase. Okay, that is known as primase. So that is the initial process that we have understood. Now the DNA will keep replicating, the RNA primer will again attach, the DNA will replicate, RNA primer will again attach, the DNA will replicate. So at multiple sequences, the RNA primer will go and attach and the DNA replication will go on. So we will have a different strand which is getting generated over here. So a different strand is getting generated over here, right? That is what is being generated, right, over here. Now what happens at the end of the DNA? That is what is the question. So I'm just zooming in the end over here. Let's assume this is the end. Now this is the above DNA. Now this is the end of the DNA, which is the telomere sequence. Okay, this is the telomere sequence. Now when the RNA primer is coming over here, it is attaching over here, the DNA replication is happening. But when it comes at the end of the telomere sequence, it is difficult for the RNA primer to attach itself. Okay, and when it becomes difficult for the RNA primer to attach itself to the end of it, some portion of the telomere sequence will not get replicated. Okay, so the DNA that we have, the next DNA that we are going to have, will have shortened version of telomere. Okay, you have understood? Because it is difficult to replicate the ends of the DNA, and that is why the DNA which is being formed after it will be a shorter version of DNA. So gradually, after multiple replications, shortening of the telomere happens. Now let's understand. Now let's assume that this telomere, now after multiple replications, let's assume we have this particular DNA, one strand of DNA I'm talking about, and this telomere has become very, very short. Okay, now the RNA primer cannot attach over here. The RNA primer cannot attach over here. This is the stage when the cell growth, the cell division will stop. Okay, the cell division is going to stop, and therefore beyond this point, this particular cell will not get replicated, and that is the end of replication. Okay, because the telomere has shortened to such critical length that it can no longer be replicated, and therefore if we replicate this DNA, a crucial element of the DNA will not be replicated, and that is something which the body does not want. We cannot lose out on information. Okay, that is known as telomere shortening. So as we age, multiple replications of the cell is happening, and as we age, this particular telomere sequence shortens to the extent that it cannot be replicated further. Now this is the reason of aging. Okay, this is the reason of aging, that cell has stopped division. Okay, so that is one of the reasons of aging. Now what we can see over here is that what scientists have said is that there is an enzyme which is by the name of telomerase. Okay, there is an enzyme by the name of telomerase. Now for the cells which are stem cell, okay, cells which are stem cell and the cells which are germ cells, all right, for these two kind of cells, this particular enzyme is active. Okay, this particular enzyme is active and it keeps on adding the telomere sequence at the end of the cell. So that is why these cells have better replicability capabilities when compared to the somatic cells that we just talked about. Okay, so telomerase is an enzyme which is active with respect to stem cells and the germ cells, and that is why they have better replicability with respect to the somatic cells, and that is why somatic cells might die, they will die at a later stage. Okay, so the scientists are trying to modify or play with this particular enzyme so that it can act even on the somatic cells, right, and can keep on adding the telomere sequence, and therefore aging can be delayed, just like they are acting on the stem cells and the germ cells. So that is what the scientists are trying to do, and that is what geroscience is over here. Okay, understood over here till this point? Now let's have a look at the other reasons of this particular problem of aging. Now as we see cellular senescence. Now as I told you, after telomere sequencing or telomere shortening, the cell growth stops. Okay, so this stopping of the cell growth or stopping of the replication process, is known as cellular senescence. Okay, that is what is known as cellular senescence. Now this cellular senescence can occur because of other reasons as well. Okay, not just because of telomere shortening. For example, what is the mechanism of cell division? Now let's say the cell's DNA is being damaged, right? Maybe the DNA is damaged, maybe the other organelles of the cell is damaged, right, because of aging, right? Maybe all those functions which are required, those processes, those enzymes which are required for the division of the cell, they are damaged, they are not performing well because of aging. So this particular stage will be reached, which is cellular senescence. Okay, so this word is very important. Maybe from the prelims perspective, they can put a word, what is this word related to? So you will know that this word is related to stopping or the reduction in the cell growth process. Okay, that is the another reason. The third reason which is mentioned over here is chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation. Now chronic inflammation is basically, so see, whenever you get hurt, okay, when we have some kind of a wound or something like that, we know that inflammation happens in the body, and this is because of immune system, especially because of the release of these molecules which are known as cytokines. Okay, which is responsibility of the immune system. So inflammation at that point of time, when we get hurt, when there is some kind of wound or some problem in the body, inflammation happens so that the other tissues, the other parts of the body are not getting affected. Okay, the inflammation will happen, all the immune system will, the white blood cells will start acting, will reduce the bacterial or the viral infection, whatever is happening over there, and therefore it will stop the infection from spreading. But what happens if this immune system starts malfunctioning? Okay, what happens if the immune system starts malfunctioning? That is when chronic inflammation will happen, lot of inflammation will happen. Now this inflammation, which was earlier responsible for protecting the tissues, now because of chronic inflammation, it is going to hurt the tissues, it is going to hurt the organs, it is going to hurt the cells and the various mechanisms of the cells. Now with aging, the immune system starts to malfunction. Okay, because of multiple reasons. That's what the scientists are trying to understand. And because of this malfunctioning, there is huge amount of release of these chemicals, the cytokines. Okay, and then that results into chronic inflammation. Okay, this is known as inflammaging. Okay, this is basically a term, inflammation, and you relate and you add aging to it, so inflammaging. Okay, like that. So that can be one of the terms maybe in your prelims examination. Okay, so that is the result of chronic inflammation. Fine. So that is the third reason why aging is happening. Now the fourth reason which the scientists say is because of the mitochondrial dysfunction. So what is a mitochondria? This is basically an organelle in the cell which is responsible for energy production, right? So this particular organ is responsible for energy production in the form of ATPs. Right, that is something which is a basic information we all know, right? Now what happens is that as the process of energy production, a different kind of chemicals is released which are known as reactive oxygen species. They are known as reactive oxygen species. Okay, Now, these species are like free radicals. Have you heard about free radicals? Right? They are like free radicals. And do you know that free radicals affect or impact our body? They have negative impact on the body, on the organs, on the cell. They might lead to death or damage of the cell. So these reactive oxygen species, which are released as the consequence of mitochondria's process of creating energy, right, can in turn damage the mitochondria itself, can also damage the other cells as well, can damage the DNA, can damage the protein, can damage the lipids. And if all these things start getting damaging, and that's what happens with aging. More and more we are going for this particular aging process, more and more these substances are released, more and more they damage the other cells and other components of the body, and therefore aging progresses. Okay, so mitochondrial dysfunction is a characteristic or is a phenomena because of which ROS, which is the reactive oxygen species, will be released in more number. There will be imbalance. So for example, to tackle this particular reactive oxygen species, we can take antioxidants. That is why it is being said that you should take more and more, vitamin C, lemon, ginger, these kind of things which have a lot of antioxidants. So these antioxidants will be used to tackle the free radicals, will be used to tackle the ROS. But when there is a misbalance between these two things, it is going to hurt the body. Okay, and mitochondria is not just for energy production. It is, what are the other functions of mitochondria? It is basically responsible for calcium regulation as well, isn't it? Basically responsible for calcium regulation, and therefore if this particular process gets hurt, then the bone weakening will happen, and so many other problems will start getting created in the body. And that is what is the consequence of aging. It is also responsible for regulated cell death. Now we need to remove those malfunctioning cells. We have to remove them, right? And mitochondria does play a process there as well. And if they are not being removed, toxins and everything will start getting created. Again, they are going to hurt the body. So mitochondrial dysfunction is one of the reasons why aging is happening. Okay, and it is because of the process that we just discussed. Now, the other reason behind aging is the DNA damage and the damage in the repair process, which overall hurts the genomic stability of the body. Now, DNA, of course, we know that it's one of the most important component. This is the entire, genetic information of the entire body. Now, this can be hurt because of various radical chemicals, radicals or chemicals, radiative chemicals, right? Some chemicals, mutagens, they are known as basically mutagens, right? They are known as mutagens. Right, so some kind of radiation, UV radiation, or things that we might eat, our diet, everything might have an impact on the DNA's repair capabilities. So DNA damage is normal. Some form of DNA will get damaged because of the various environmental procedures. But then we do have DNA repair procedures as well in our body. And if those procedures are being hurt, are being damaged, that is when the DNA starts getting damaged. That is when the cell's replication process will get damaged, cells functioning will get damaged, and therefore that leads to aging, right? And that ultimately impacts the genomic instability, that ultimately impacts the genome's stability in our body, right? So there will be errors in the DNA replication process. Errors will creep in, right? So all these things will lead to aging, will lead to age-related diseases, right? So that is something which is there. Now these were the reasons of aging. So now obviously, what is the solution? What are the various solutions of aging? How do we tackle it? So as I have told you, for example, the first thing that we discussed was the telomere shortening. So the scientists are looking at telomerase as the enzyme. Okay, telomerase as the enzyme, which they want to act on the somatic cells as well, want to keep creating the telomere shortening, right? And therefore we can delay the aging process. Now these enzymes which we are discussing are known as geroenzymes. Gerozymes. So they are known as gerozymes. All right. So these enzymes which we discuss. Now a second enzyme which the scientists are trying to monitor, are trying to modify, right, is sirtuins. These are sirtuins, right? These enzymes are basically responsible for the DNA repair process, are responsible for the gene expression process, are responsible for the functioning of the mitochondria. So they help in the DNA repair, they help in the mitochondrial functioning as well, and they also help in the genetic expression. All right. So that is, so if we are able to modify, if we are able to understand the functioning and control these enzymes, maybe these diseases, these mitochondrial dysfunction and all these things we can avoid. Okay. So that is the thing behind sirtuins. Now, the third thing is with respect to the proteins. Now, obviously with aging, the structure of the protein gets destabilized, the proteins start getting damaged, right? So we have an enzyme which are basically the proteases, right? The enzymes which are responsible for protein synthesis and balance of the protein are known as proteases. So again, scientists are trying to modify, trying to control these kind of enzymes so that we can ensure that the protein folding, protein formation, right, and the regulated death of the protein is balanced, right? So that particular thing. Apart from this, there are, things that we already know. For example, we have to maintain a balanced diet. We have to ensure that we have regular exercises, right? We have to ensure that we sleep properly. We take less stress, because stress again releases those hormones, those chemicals like cortisols and everything, which again damage the entire body. So these are the things which the scientists are trying to control with respect to the geroscience things that we have, right? So in this particular topic, we have understood what exactly is geroscience. It is basically trying to understand the aging process. It is basically, trying to modify, control the various processes which are controllable, and then therefore using that particular technology to ensure that the aging is reduced, right? So that's all for this particular topic. The topic for our discussion now is the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee. Okay, so now you can see that it is the news over here that you can see is that India is trying to achieve a debris-free space mission by 2030. All right. So the question arises again, how do we approach this particular topic if it was in the news? The question arises, why exactly are we, so much concerned about space debris? What exactly is space debris? Why are we concerned about space debris? What are the various efforts which we have already made, and what can be the solutions to these kind of problems? So let's start with the thing that what exactly is space debris and what is the exact problem with respect to space debris. So what are these space debris? They are tiny particles. When we launch satellite, some portion of the satellite might, disintegrate and will start revolving around the Earth. Right. We might also have collision between 2 or 3 satellites, right? Because of that also space debris or these waste material will get produced. And since the time human have started exploring space, we have launched so many space missions. And once their time is up, once their life is up, they are still rotating, they're doing something in the space, right? So they are defunct, but still there in the orbit somehow, right? So all these things create the humongous problem of space debris. So if we look at some of the data points, it says that almost like 30,000 particles of space debris is there in the space, which are more than 10 centimeters. So this we are talking about huge particles, okay, more than 10 centimeter, right? And if you're talking about particles which are of the size of millimeters, there are millions and millions of particles, okay, in the space, and they're moving almost, they can move at a speed of almost like 30,000 kilometers per hour, which is humongous speed. Even a small particle moving at such a huge speed can be a huge disaster, can be a huge danger for the space missions that we have already launched and the future space missions. For example, the space station that we have, International Space Station that we have, or whatever space missions, communication satellites, navigation satellites that we are launching, this small particle will go hurt and will damage the entire satellite. And that is why this particular issue of space debris has become important, right? So that is one of the things. Another term, key term with respect to space debris, which can come in the examination, is the Kessler's syndrome. Okay. Now, what happens is that when you have a lot of space debris, one event of this space debris getting attached or hurting some of the space satellites will result into multiple such cascading effects. If there is one accident, lot of space debris are getting created. These space debris are going to create more and more accident, right? And then they are going to create more and more accident. So that is the issue, and that is what is being tackled by Kessler's syndrome, right? So it's the cascading impact because of the space debris. Okay, so these things you have to remember. You can start your mains answer maybe with respect to this particular thing, right? And this Kessler syndrome can be something which can be asked in the prelims examination as well. So big countries like US, UK, those European space agencies, all those countries, all those space agencies have contributed in creating this particular space debris. When countries like China and even India, when they are testing the anti-satellite missiles, right? India tested the ASAT missile, right? The anti-satellite missile in the year 2019. So this missile also was supposed to have created a lot of space debris, but then when these debris enter the earth, they definitely get burnt out, right? So that is also one of the things. So this is the entire problem of space debris. Now the question is that what are the efforts that we have taken with respect to the problem of space debris? So we have had several organizations at the world level which are functioning for this particular problem. So the most important organization is the UN's organization, which is the UN's Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Okay, UN's Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. So this particular committee is responsible for getting several guidelines, right? So this is responsible for getting creating several guidelines based on which we can launch our missions, based on which we can reduce this problem of space debris. So the guidelines are known as space debris mitigation strategies or space debris mitigation guidelines, right? So there are certain guidelines by from this particular UN organization which are important for each and every space agencies which is there. Now the second thing which is actually the topic of our discussion is the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee. Okay, that is the topic, Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee. Now, this particular committee is basically a collaboration of the various space agencies that we have across the world, right? For example, the NASA is part of it. Even the Russia's space agency, which is Roscosmos, is part of it. ISRO is part of this particular committee. The European Space Agency is also part of it, and multiple other agencies. Even China's Space Agency is also part of this particular committee. So it's a collaboration of various space agencies across the world. And what is the mandate? Why have they collaborated? The mandate is basically to solve this problem of space debris. Right, so they are going for these guidelines. They are also creating these guidelines. They will be having working groups, right, coordinating between the various committees, coordinating between the various space launches, right. They are working on various technologies which can be incorporated to ensure that the problem of space debris can be reduced. So they have these kind of things which is happening. Now, to understand about this particular committee, few more factual information. This was formally established in 1993. Okay, so the date of formally establishment is in 1993, right? They share the information among each other and therefore try to solve this problem of space debris. Now, we also have certain other agencies. For example, the European Space Agency does have a space debris mitigation handbook. Okay, so that is also there. We have the space debris mitigation guidelines. We have the space debris mitigation handbook by the European Space Agency. So these are certain efforts which have been taken with respect to the space debris. In fact, at the UN organizations, the countries are demanding a separate treaty, or the treaties that we have, the outer space treaties that we have, right? They are demanding that the problem of space debris should be included in those treaties as well, so that it becomes mandatory for the countries to manage this particular problem. All right. So that is one of the things. Now let's discuss what can be the way forward, what can be the certain measures that we can take to ensure that we solve this particular problem of space debris. So we can divide these measures into pre-mission. So before the mission, what can we do, right? That can be one method, one zone of methods. Second could be during the mission. What can we do during the mission is going on, when the space mission is still active? This is before launching the mission. And this could be, third could be, when you have post-launch or post-mission strategies, right? So whenever such a question comes in your mains examination, you can have this particular format and write your answer, isn't it? So let's discuss about pre-mission strategies. What all can be the pre-mission strategies? So we can have let's say, first of all, could be that we should have space situational awareness. Okay, there has to be space situational awareness. We should be aware about where are the various space debris particles available, in which orbit, at which speed are they moving. This will help us in creating proper parameters for our own launch. Okay, so there has to be space situational awareness, or it is known as space surveillance has to be done. So first of all is that we have to collect, basically this is the collection of data to become more and more aware about the problem of space debris. Okay, then we can create missions which have less probability of creating debris particles. Okay, so we can, so for example, when we create a space, let's say a space shuttle or the satellites, we can make sure that there are less particles, there are less arrangements which can come out and create and contribute to space debris. So the way we design our space shuttles, the way we design our space missions can be changed to ensure that they contribute less to the space debris problem. Also, this another thing could be that shielding. It is known as shielding. So shielding basically is that the material with which we make these satellites or the space shuttles or our own space missions should be strong enough that a small impact here and there should not create a consequent space debris. Okay, so that can be shielding. So the material has to be better. Okay. So when we are launching, we can keep in mind these kind of things with respect to the space debris problem. Okay, now if we look at the during the mission, what can be done during the mission? So during the mission, let's say we have already launched it, we need to maneuver. Okay, we need to maneuver. So to maneuver, we need extra fuel. For example, we are already space aware, we are aware of the things which are happening in the space, right? How the debris is moving, we are monitoring it continuously, and we find out that this particular debris might hit the satellite. Therefore, we should have the capabilities that we can maneuver this satellite and move it out of the way of the space debris. So that kind of capabilities have to be there. Now, this will require extra funding. Right? This will require extra infrastructure, this will require extra fuel to be there on the satellites, right? So that obviously will make the missions costly, but then the impact could also be, huge, because if we are reducing this problem of space debris, then definitely the other missions will not get impacted. So that is what we can do during the mission things. Now let's see what we can do in the post-launch thing. What can be done during post-launch? So first of all, there are certain terms that we have to remember. One is the 25-year rule. Okay, one is the 25-year rule. Now this rule is being discussed in the UN committees as well, and they basically say that as let's say the mission's life has ended, within 25 years of the end of the mission's life, we should deorbit the entire mission. We should bring back the mission from the space and therefore dispose it properly, or deorbit so that it burns in the atmosphere of the Earth. So that is not a now you have to remember, it is not mandatory. It is a voluntary. It is voluntary commitment which the committees are saying that the country should have, right? So within 25 years, if you find this particular term, 25-year rule, you should understand that this is with respect to bringing down, deorbiting, removing that particular space mission once it has ended its particular purpose. Okay, that is one thing. Second thing is the term which is passivation. The term is passivation. All right, passivation. So what is passivation? Passivation is basically making the mission passive. So, you know, let's say the mission has completed its purpose, right? But it still might have some of the fuels left, right? So that particular fuel, if it is getting hurt by a space debris, if some kind of accident happened, that fuel might blast, right? There can be some kind of huge explosion or blast in the space, which might lead to multiple other space debris issues. So passivation means that you should use that completely that particular fuel and empty the entire things which can be explosive and such kind of things, and make the mission completely passive. This will also include bringing down or deorbiting the entire mission. So we are reducing the threats from the missions which have already served their purpose. Okay, that is the two terms which you have to remember. Now, what can be the other things? So we can destroy the satellites, right? So the satellites are moving in it, so we can destroy the satellites with the help of laser beams. Okay, that is also one of the technologies which is coming up, right? Then a very famous technology, and you would have heard about it, is the harpoon technology. Okay, the harpoons, or using the nets, right? Harpoons or using the nets to bring down the control the satellites which have served their purpose. So harpoons are like, you launch a mission which will have a harpoon or a barb kind of a structure. It will go and attach itself to the space debris and will slowly reduce the speed, deorbit it and bring it back. Okay, so it's like a rope kind of a structure which will go and attach and then bring back the entire space debris. And then we can use nets with the help of which we can deorbit the entire space debris. So these are the various kind of technologies that we can use with respect to it. So we need to keep tracking, we need to have policies and surveillance going on, and certain technological things that we have to use to ensure that the space debris problem, we are properly disposing of the entire satellites which are not in use anymore. Okay, so that will probably solve this particular problem of space debris, and that is what India's mission is. So what is India's trying to do? The most important thing is that what is India trying to do? India is basically going for a space debris free mission by the debris free space mission by 2030. So all that we have discussed is something which India is trying to achieve. And how is it trying to achieve? With the help of its mission, which is debris-free space mission. Now, we have an organization which is IS4OM. This is ISRO's system for safe and sustainable space operation management. So ISRO's system so this is India's system nodal point for ensuring this particular mission. So this is ISRO's system for safe and sustainable space operation management. Okay, so this will act as a nodal point. For debris-free space mission, and this particular space mission is under the Department of Space. So these are the factual things that you have to remember. So they will try to monitor the Indian space satellites, they will try to gather the data, they will try to avoid the collisions, so maneuverability has to be there, and then they will have centralized management, and then applying all the best practices which are there in the world. Indian Space Agency is trying to ensure that they have a debris-free space mission, both by the government, now this is very important, both by the government and the non-government sources. So even the private sector has to ensure that their missions are space debris free. So after this particular policy of the Indian space policy of 2023, the private sector participation is going to increase in the Indian space scenario. So even the non-government or the private sector has to ensure that their missions are space debris free. So that's all for this mission. So we have understood the problem of space debris. We have understood that it's a huge problem. Kessler syndrome is something that we saw. We saw the steps which have been taken and what all can be done as way forward, and what is India's approach with respect to space debris. All right. The topic for discussion now is the nitroplast. Okay, so as you can see, it has been in news for quite some time, and it says that the scientists have found out a organelle, okay, which is responsible for fixing nitrogen. So they have found out the first algae which can fix nitrogen. Now algae is a eutrophic eukaryote, right? So algae is a eukaryote organism, and this kind of capabilities to fix nitrogen was not usually present in the algae or in the eukaryotes, right? So that is the discovery. So this particular thing, when we're reading this particular news, what all things should come to our mind, that how do we prepare for the exams perspective? We have to understand what is, first of all, what is the use or what is the importance of nitrogen when it comes to the plants or the animals. So let's first of all start with the importance of nitrogen. Why exactly do we need nitrogen by the plants and the animals? So as you would know, nitrogen is the building block of the proteins, right? The amino acids. So basically the proteins that we have in our body, they have a component of nitrogen, right? And that is the most important purpose of the use of nitrogen. Okay, that is one thing. The second thing that should be there in our mind is it is responsible for the building of nucleic acids, which are basically the DNA and the RNA. So can we function without DNAs and the RNAs? No, we cannot, right? The protein synthesis, the genetic information, everything is stored as DNAs and the RNAs, right? So therefore we need these things, and therefore that is the importance of nitrogen, both in the plants and the animals, right? Especially in the plants, they are also responsible for the structure of chlorophyll. Okay, so again, chlorophyll is one of the most important component of plant for the photosynthesis purpose, and therefore nitrogen serves as a huge importance for the plants. We also, in terms of in plants, the nitrogen are responsible for the stronger stems. So the physical sustainability of the plant and the leaves, the stronger stems and stronger leaves is something which is the responsibility of the nitrogen. So again, the physical structure, the physical stability of the plant is something which is done by the nitrogen. Now because of nitrogen, as I told you, they are part of the chlorophylls, therefore it helps in enhancing the photosynthesis process, right? So that is where it comes the use of nitrogen. So that is another use. Now now when the photosynthesis process will be enhanced, therefore better quality fruits, right? The food that we eat, better quality fruits and food will be produced. So again, the nitrogen has importance over here, right? So in terms of plants, these are the various importance of nitrogen. What all would be the importance of nitrogen in the animals as well? So for example, in animals, in humans, it is very important for the functioning of the nervous system. Okay, functioning of the nervous system. So nitrogen is a very important component which ensures that the nervous system functions properly. Nitrogen also is the component of the ATP, okay, the energy through which we get the energy. So it helps in energy transfer. Nitrogen helps in energy transfer as well, right? So and also it is part of certain hormones as well. So to maintain our systems in the body, right, the nitrogen is the part of certain hormones as well, and therefore it helps in the complete sustainability of the body. So it also helps the plants to protect itself from the pest. So nitrogen has various applicability, it has various applications. Right, now we have to understand that why this particular news has become important. So now we understood that nitrogen is something which the plants definitely need, right? Now the question is that how do the plants get the nitrogen? Now this is where things become tricky. So the nitrogen which is available in the atmosphere, right, the normal nitrogen, which is the atmospheric nitrogen, is something which cannot be used by the plants directly. Right? Why? Because this of course has, this first of all has a triple bond. So breaking this triple bond becomes very difficult. It requires huge amount of energy. So This cannot be broken down easily by the plants. And second is that nitrogen is an inert compound, right? It is inert in itself. It's an inert element, right? So therefore, because of these two reasons, it's very difficult for the plants and the animals, of course, to use directly the atmospheric nitrogen which is there. So how do they do it? So basically what do they do is, there is a symbiotic relationship between the plants and the nitrogen fixing bacteria which are present, which can be present either in the roots of the plants, or it can be present in the soil as well, right? So several examples of nitrogen fixing bacteria, for example, we have the azotobacter, right? That is there, the azotobacter. We have the clostridium. So these are free living nitrogen fixing bacteria, right? Then you would have heard about this particular rhizobium, isn't it? Rhizobium, which is having a symbiotic relationship with the plant. So the rhizobium will help in fixing the nitrogen, provide the nitrogen in the usable format. What is that usable format? It's mostly ammonia, right? It's mostly ammonia. It's the usable format of nitrogen, which will be converted into nitrates and nitrites, and which will be used by the plant. So that is where the nitrogen cycle comes up, right? So these rhizobium will help in such conversion, right? Fixing the nitrogen, and then it will be converted into a usable format, and then the plants will give the rhizobium their food and other things for their survival. Okay, so that is where this particular thing, the thing about symbiotic relationship between plants and the rhizobium comes up. All right. So this is the entire mechanism of how the nitrogen is being used. But now, what is the latest discovery? The latest discovery is all about, so here earlier we saw that we need these bacteria for the plants to fix the nitrogen. The latest discovery says that now it was assumed that these bacteria, only these bacteria and archaea, only these two were having the capability to fix nitrogen. That was the assumption before. All right, and they were using some kind of enzyme which was nitrogenase. Okay, some kind of enzyme which is by the name of nitrogenase. Right, so they were using this particular enzyme to break that triple bond of nitrogen and then convert it into usable format. Now, these are prokaryotes, as you would know. These are prokaryotes, right? So it was assumed that only prokaryotes have the capability to fix nitrogen, and eukaryotes we could not find till now any direct mechanism of converting nitrogen into usable format. Now the latest discovery is all about eukaryotes. Eukaryotes, especially this particular algae, right? This particular algae having the capability to convert the nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, into usable format, right? So the research is still going on, that how does this particular algae converts the nitrogen, but it is found that there is a organelle which has been named as Nitroplast. Okay, so there is an organelle. So it has become part of the algae's cellular system. Okay, so they have found out an organelle which is by the name of Nitroplast, which is doing this particular function of converting the atmospheric nitrogen into usable format. All right, so therefore what the scientists are trying to find out, number one, how have this particular organelles come into picture, from where have these Nitroplast come? That is the first thing which the scientists are trying to find out. So the first theory says that for a long period of time, these plants and these bacteria and archaea had a symbiotic relationship between them. Okay, or maybe this algae and the bacteria are having the symbiotic relationship between them. So ultimately what happened was, this bacteria, and specifically this bacteria which is UCNYA, okay, unicellular cyanobacteria, right, of the group A. So basically this particular bacteria UCNYA is supposed, the scientists have figured out that this particular bacteria, which was earlier in the symbiotic relationship with the algae, gradually, because of long years of evolution, has become part of the algae. So now this is being driven by the genetic code of the algae itself. And that is why this has become an organelle in the algae. That is one theory which tries to understand how this Nitroplast would have come into picture. Okay, the second theory says that might be because of evolution, the algae have self-generated this particular organelle. Okay, that is a second theory. So the research is still going on, but the most important thing over here is the usability. Now, why is this research important? Why is this discovery very important? Now, first of all, the discovery says that eukaryotes are having the capability. So maybe the scientists will try to find out other algae, right, which can produce their own nitrogen. Now, if it is present in eukaryotes, can we transfer this particular genetic mutation, or can we transfer this particular genetic modification to the plants? Now we understand the use of the importance of nitrogen for the plants, right? And that is where this particular discovery comes into picture. If we can use this particular nitroplast into plants, then definitely we will reduce the importance or the use of fertilizers in our agriculture, right? The plants will not need external artificial fertilizers, and they can directly fix nitrogen and use the atmospheric nitrogen based on this particular nitroplast. That will reduce not just the cost, this will not just reduce the cost, but will also reduce the environmental impact of the fertilizers, right? That is the most important use applications which can happen because of this particular discovery, right? So that is there. Now, that is why this particular topic becomes important, the particular topic of nitroplast. So what can be asked? Maybe in the examination you will have a word which is nitroplast, right? And they will say what is this related to? So you can answer this particular thing, that this is an organelle, right, which is responsible for fixing the nitrogen. So we can create genetically modified crops which can have the capability to fix their own nitrogen, hence reducing the dependency on fertilizers, hence reducing the cost of agriculture, reducing the impact on environment, and reducing India's import bill as well, because urea, is something which is very costly and having a huge amount of import dependency of India as well. So that is all about this particular topic. The topic of discussion now is a black hole, which is by the name of Gaia BH3. It's called the sleeping giant black hole. Now, black hole is something which maybe the scientists keep on finding regularly, but this particular black hole is special, and that is why it has become important. So first of all, before we enter into what are exactly are the characteristics of this particular black hole, let us try to understand that how exactly a black hole is being formed. So let's try to understand. Let me take you through the journey of a star. Okay, so just like humans, stars also have a birth, they have a youth phase, and then they have a phase of death. Okay, so this particular diagram simply shows the various phenomena, various stages in the life of a star. So when the birth is happening, this is known as nebula, right? There is no nuclear fusion reaction which is going on as of now. It is just the cluster of gases, dust particles, every material over there which are coming together, maybe in future forming a particular star, right? Then we have an intermediate stage, right? Over here we have the intermediate stage which is known as protostar. Okay, this stage is known as protostar. Now you have to remember that this can be a point of confusion as well. Over here also the reaction has not yet started. That is what you have to remember. Okay, so at a protostar level, when these particles have come together, the reaction, the nuclear fusion reaction, have still not started. That is one thing. Now this is the birth phase, right? Now comes the youth phase, right? And that is where these nebula and the protostar converts into a star. For example, our own sun. So in our own sun, there is nuclear fusion reaction which is happening, isn't it? Now there is huge amount of fuel, huge amount of hydrogen, helium, all those which is present in the star. Now over the period of time, this particular fuel will start getting consumed, will start getting empty, right? So at some point of time they will not have sufficient fuel for the reactions to happen, and that will start the death phase of the star. Okay, so in death phase is something, the multiple things which can happen. So, and those multiple things, those multiple forms depend on the initial mass of the star. Okay, so now let's quickly understand what happens and why and at which parameters, at which stage the star will convert into a black hole. Okay, so for example, this particular star has a mass which is less than let's say, which is less than 1 solar mass. So our reference point is our own sun's mass. Okay, so if it is less than 1 solar masses, right, or if it is less than 0.5, let's say, let's start from here, it is less than 0.5 times the solar mass, it will become a red dwarf. So this is a red dwarf. So what I'm talking about is the mass of the sun, or mass of the star at the initial phase. Alright, so when the mass is less than 0.5 solar masses, it will convert into red dwarf. If the mass is less than 1 solar masses, it will convert into red giant. Right, so these names is something that you have to remember. It will convert into red giant, right? Now, now this will convert into red giant, right? If the masses around, or more or less around, or around 1 solar mass, or slightly more than the 1 solar mass, right? Now, if the mass, now this is an average star, all right? And now if the mass is huge, if the mass is really huge, it will convert into red supergiant, right? It will convert into red super giant. Till this point it is clear. Now what will happen is that red dwarf is something which will keep on burning for a very long period. Okay, it will keep on burning for a very long period. Red giant is something, now what will happen is that when they're dying, then the core is going to collapse and the outer layer is going to expand. They will leave the outer layer, right? So as and when the outer layer is expanding, the core is collapsing, it is becoming more and more cooler, right? The red giant will convert into a phase which is known as planetary nebula. Okay, when the entire outer covering is given up, so this is known as planetary nebula, right? And then it converts into white dwarf gradually over a period of time. Now over here we have to understand the Chandrasekhar limit, which is 1.4 solar masses. So if the mass of the star, as we talked about, if the mass is more than 1 solar masses, it converts into a red giant. But if the mass is less than 1.4 solar masses, it will convert into a stable white dwarf. The white dwarf will stay for a long time. But if the mass is more than 1.4 solar masses, the white dwarf might not be stable. So that is what is known as the Chandrasekhar limit. Okay. Now let's try to understand the phenomena or the life cycle of a supermassive star, right? Which was huge, which it can be 8 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times more than the mass of the sun. So what happens is that this particular star, the red supergiant, will because it is having huge amount of mass, huge amount of collapse is going to happen of the material, right? And therefore, because these material is going to get condensed in a very small volume, it will have a blast. So that is known as supernova. Okay. So post supernova, it can either convert into a neutron star which is having huge combination of neutrons, or it can convert into a black hole. Now again, it depends on the initial mass of the sun, initial mass of the star. Okay, so what happens is that if let's say, I'm just rubbing it, if let's say the initial mass, okay, if let's say the initial mass, total, I'm talking about the total mass. If the total mass was between 8 to 20 solar masses, I'm talking about the total mass. Okay, so the total mass is between 8 to 20 solar masses. This will convert into a neutron star. Now this can be 20, this can be 25. The values keep varying. There is no particular limit. But then if it is in this particular range, it will convert into a neutron star. If the total mass is more than 25 solar masses, all right, this will convert into a black hole. Correct? So this will convert into a black hole. All right. Now, if we talk about the core mass, now this was the total mass. Let's talk about the core mass. So as we talked about, if the core mass is less than 1.4, this will convert into a white dwarf, a stable white dwarf. If the core mass is more than 1.4 but less than 3 solar masses, so now we are talking about the core mass. So there is a total mass and then there is a mass of the core. So if you're talking about the mass of the core, if it is between 1.4 to 3 solar masses, it can convert into a neutron star. all right, and when the core mass is more than 3 solar masses, it converts into a black hole. So these are the two things, that is two numericals that you have to remember. So what happens when does a star become a black hole? When it is huge, right? It needs to have a mass, initial mass of more than 25 solar masses, the total mass, and the core mass has to be more than 3 solar masses of the core of the sun. Okay, so this is the entire journey of the star. Now let's talk about what exactly is fascinating about this particular black hole. Now let's talk about this particular black hole, the Gaia BH3. We have talked about the entire cycle of the black holes, the entire cycle of the star and how it becomes a black hole. Let's talk about this Gaia black hole 3. So now first of all, let's understand which particular mission has discovered it. So this is by the ESA's, European Space Agency's mission, which is Gaia mission. Right, so that is the mission under which we have discovered this particular black hole. Now the mandate of this particular mission was to map the entire Milky Way galaxy, right? So our own galaxy was to be mapped by this particular mission, the Gaia mission of the European Space Agency. It was launched in 2013, and this was to be done till 2018. But since it is still working, so the life period has been extended to 2025. So under this mission, we have found out this particular Gaia black hole 3. Right, now we have to understand one more thing about this particular mission. Just a small fact about it. It uses 2 telescopes. So it uses 2 telescopes for its own viewing, and they function under a very cold environment, right? Under very cold temperature. So that's the basics about this particular mission. It wanted to map the entire Milky Way galaxy, and it has found this particular Gaia black hole 3. Now the question is that there are so many galaxies, there are so many black holes that we keep finding. What is special about this particular black hole? The first thing which is very special about this particular black hole is that it is very close to the Earth. It is just 2000 light years away. Now this gives the opportunity to the scientist to study about this particular black hole in more and more detail. So that is the first very surprising, or let's say a very unique thing about this particular black hole. It's one of the closest black holes to Earth. The second important thing about this particular black hole is its mass. So this black hole is more than 33 times the solar masses, and that is what is surprising. Why is it surprising? Black holes can have huge amount of mass, right? But the point is that this black hole is a stellar black hole. Okay, this is a stellar black hole. Now the question is that a stellar black hole, this is the first time that we have found a stellar black hole to have such a huge amount of mass. Now what is a stellar black hole? Stellar black holes are those which are formed by the collapse of the star. Okay, which are formed by the collapse of the star. So as we saw earlier, when the star has a huge amount of mass, maybe let's say more than 25 solar masses, right, or 3 times more, 3 times solar masses of the core of the star, it will convert into a black hole when the collapse will happen after supernova. Now such black holes have lesser masses, right? Then there will be other kind of black holes, maybe let's say the super giant black hole. So there will be other category of black hole which will be super massive black hole. Okay, supermassive black hole. These black holes were supposed to have huge amount of masses, but over here we are finding out that a stellar black hole which is formed by the collapse of a star is having huge amount of mass. That is the surprising point. Now what is the supermassive black hole? So as we know about the properties of black hole, when a black hole is formed, it is going to attract, right? It is going to attract various things from the universe, and something which enters the black hole does not have, it will not be moved out of it, and it cannot come out of it, right? So this property of accretion of the material is responsible for creating huge amount of mass of a black hole. But this particular black hole is a sleeping black hole. It is not accreting, it is inactive. Okay, and it is formed by the collapse of the star. So generally those black holes have less masses, right? So that is something which is very surprising about this particular black hole, right? Now the situation is that the question arises is that how come a stellar black hole has such a huge amount of mass, and that is where the scientists are trying to figure out. So one theory basically says that maybe there is some other mechanism, whatever mechanisms we know of how the black holes are created, maybe there is some other mechanisms based on which this particular black hole is created, right? So that is something assumption, that is something the point of research. But then there is another theory which the scientists are proposing, and that is the theory of binary star system. So the scientists are saying that this particular black hole could be the result of a binary star system. What is binary star system? So over here, let's say we have two stars, right? We have two stars which were revolving around each other, right? And now what happened is that these were big stars and they were ultimately going to convert into a black hole. Let's say this is a larger star and it is first of all converting into a black hole. Okay, this is converting into a black hole. Now as we know, when the black hole, when a star is going for this conversion into black hole, a lot of mass will be thrown away as well. Huge amount of mass is going to concentrate in the core, that is why it becomes a black hole. But then lot of mass will be thrown away as well. There is loss of mass also when the black holes are formed, right? So whatever mass was lost for this particular large star, maybe this star gathered that loss, right? Gathered that mass, and that is why it became a very huge star. And when it collapsed, it led to the rise of formation of this particular Gaia black hole 3. All right, so this limit, the 33 solar masses, is beyond the stellar black holes, right? But since this is stellar black hole, therefore there has to be a different mechanism for the formation of this particular black hole. So this is something which was very interesting with respect to this particular black hole. The scientists might try to find out how exactly these kind of black holes are being formed, and maybe we might question our own understanding of the black holes. Now another important thing with respect to black holes is that there are few keywords which are related to black holes which we can understand from the exam's perspective. Now, I think you would already know what is singularity. So singularity basically is that point where things reach infinity. Okay, so for example, infinite density. So that is that point of reaching infinite density, that point of reaching infinite mass, that point of reaching infinite curvature is known as singularity. So black hole, at the middle of it, there is infinite curvature, isn't it? Right, there is infinite mass, isn't it? So because there is huge amount of density, the density will reach almost to the infinite level, and that is what is known as singularity, right? That is one thing. Then what is event horizon? What is event horizon with respect to it? So it is the boundary of the black hole. This is the point of no return. It is the point of no return, right? So anything which crosses this particular boundary, it cannot return, right? It won't be able to return back. So that is what is event horizon. It's the boundary of no return, because anything which enters black hole, there is huge amount of gravity, right? It won't come out. Even light does not come out, right? Now let's talk about ergosphere. Ergosphere is basically it's related to rotating black holes. So this is a phenomena which is specifically with respect to rotating black holes, right? Rotating black holes, right? So let's say this particular black hole is rotating, right? And so a space around this black hole will be affected because of the rotation. So it will, if this is rotating, it will also rotate some amount of space around it, right? And this sphere is around the black hole, the space which is getting influenced by the black hole, the space which is also getting rotated, is known as ergosphere. Okay, so that space which is getting influenced by the rotation of the black hole is known as ergosphere. That is the one thing. Now what is a stationary limit? Stationary limit. So a stationary limit is the point beyond which a particle cannot remain stationary and it will be influenced by the rotation of the black hole. So it basically is the boundary of the ergosphere. So over here, so let's say if the particle crosses this, it can never remain stationary. It has to be influenced by the rotation of this particular sphere. So this is black hole which is rotating, therefore the entire space which is getting influenced and it is rotating to some extent. Now, if there is a boundary beyond which you can remain stationary, if you are traveling with the speed of light, you will not be influenced by the black hole's characteristics. But if you cross this particular boundary, you cannot remain stationary. That is the limit of stationary. So that is why it is known as stationary limit. So these 4 key terms can always be asked in the prelims examination in terms of your one-liner questions. All right. So that is what you have to keep in mind. Now, with respect to this particular black hole, we have one more interesting fact is that this is being found in the constellation Aquila. Okay, so since this black hole is in news and this constellation is in news, so they might ask you the question with respect to this constellation. So this is basically the meaning of Aquila is eagle. It basically looks like a bird. If you can see in the figure over here, looks like a bird and majorly an eagle. So that is why this is being named as eagle. And the brightest star in this particular constellation, the brightest star, right, is Altair. Okay, the brightest star is Altair, right? So that is what is known as, that is what is interesting, or that is what is important to understand with respect to this particular constellation. Now, when we are reading about constellations as a theme, you should know about famous constellations. For example, we have a constellation which is Orion, right? It is also known as the Hunter. Right, it is also known as the Hunter. We have another constellation which is by the name of Ursa Major. All right, and we have a constellation by the name of Ursa Minor as well. Right, so this is known as the Great Bear, and this is known as the Little Bear. So this is something which can be asked. And then there is another constellation, famous one, which is Crux, and it is known as Southern Cross. All right, so these constellations and their name and some of their characteristics might be important. In fact, Orion has a brightest star in the Orion is the Betelgeuse, and this has already come in your prelims examination. So that is something which you can remember. Right, so that is there. With respect to the black holes, we discussed what exactly is the importance of the Gaia black hole 3 that we have found out, what is the mission which has found out, and what is the entire life cycle of a black hole, when does a star become a black hole, and about these particular constellations with respect to this particular topic. The topic of discussion now is tachyons. It's a very interesting particle. Now, if you have a look at the news over here, it says that the scientists are, there's a paper which is being published, and the scientists in that paper say that the universe might be dominated by particles which can travel faster than light. Now, this is exactly questioning, this is exactly against the theory of relativity. We know the theory of relativity by Einstein, and it says that the speed of light is constant. Nothing can move beyond that speed of light. So these particles, the research which is being done by the scientists, the paper which is being published says that there are particles, and in fact it says that the universe might be dominated by those particles which can travel, always they can travel faster than the speed of light. So that is how we are going to discuss this particular particle. There might be a question with respect to this thing. So to understand this, let's first of all try to understand what exactly was the theory of relativity, a few aspects of it, and how is it related to the tachyons. So with respect to theory of relativity, we know the special theory of relativity, which was given by Einstein in 1905, right? It said that the first thing it said that was the speed of light, right? It said that the speed of light is constant, and that is c. Okay, and this speed is constant from all the reference frame. That is the most important point. It says that, for example, if there is a train which is moving at 10 kilometers per hour, and I am standing here constant. So from my reference frame, with respect to me, that train is traveling at a speed of 10 kilometers per hour. Now what happens is that even I start running at the speed of, let's say, 10 kilometers per hour. Now from my reference frame, with respect to myself, is there any speed of the train which is also traveling at 10 kilometers per hour? So our relative speed is 0. But then Einstein says that from any reference frame, if you calculate the speed of light, it will always come out to be constant, right? Then what are the consequences of this particular thing? This is the postulate. What are the consequences? The first consequence is, let's say, the time dilation, right? It says that the time starts when the velocity increases. The time starts flowing, or time starts passing slowly. That's what you would have heard in several of the news, that these astronauts went to the space, and when they came back younger, maybe seconds younger, right? But then they came back younger. So what happens is that these astronauts are traveling at a huge speed when compared to the speed we are having on Earth. And because of that, the time for them is traveling slower, or it's moving slower. The time for us is moving faster, right? So that is what happens. Time dilation happens. That's what Einstein said with respect to his theory of relativity. The second thing which Einstein said was with respect to length contraction, right? The length contraction. So for the particles which are moving faster, as you move faster, as the velocity increases, the length starts to decrease. That is again the second thing which Einstein said. And the third thing which which he said was with respect to mass. So as the speed increases, the mass also starts to increase. The relative mass, the mass that we feel, starts to increase. Okay, so these are the things with respect to the special theory of relativity. Now, what happens when tachyons come into the picture? Tachyons basically are, these solutions. So, for example, when you are solving these equations of relativity, right, especially the Lorentz transformation equations, and you put, let's say, you take the assumption that the particle are massless. Let's assume that what will happen to these equations if the particles are massless. Okay. So two kind of solutions come up. One solution is that the particle would be moving less than the speed of light, less than or equal to the speed of light, right? So that particle we already know is photon, right? Which is massless and travels at the speed of light. That is one of the solutions. So photon is one of the solutions to the theory of relativity equations. But if we assume that what happens if the speed is more than c, right? If it is more than the speed of light, then the solution comes out to be a particle which is tachyons, right? These particles are the solutions to the theory of relativity equations of relativity. Now, over here, the mass is the imaginary mass, right? So over here, the mass is the imaginary mass. So it's like complex in nature, like, it's not like numerical, it's like complex roots of something like that. So it's imaginary mass. Imaginary mass means that this particular mass does not behave in the manner, the mass that we already know. We know a kind of mass, right? But it does not behave in that manner. So that is a trans-imaginary mass which comes up for this particular tachyons. Right. So what happens is that these tachyons are something which were first of all, given or coined in 1967 by a scientist by the name of Gerald Finberg. Okay. So in 1967, the scientist Gerald Finberg coined the term of tachyons. All right. Now, even before this particular thing, in 1904, there was a scientist by the name of Arnold Sommerfeld, who said that there are certain metaparticles which might travel more than the speed of light. Okay, so particles, scientists were always amused, were always looking for those particles which can travel faster than the speed of light. But then Einstein in 1905 said that the speed of light, nothing can move, faster than the speed of light. If you have to move faster than the speed of light, the mass will become infinite. That's what the third consequence was, right? When the speed increases, the mass also increases, right? So if you want to reach the speed of light, the mass has to be infinite, which is something which is impossible, and that is why it is said that none of the particles can reach the speed of light, right? So, but these scientists were interested in finding out that particle, and then they found out tachyon, which is just a mathematical. This is not something which has been found. It is just a mathematical equation and one of the solutions to the mathematical equation. All right. So that is there. Now how will tachyon change the way we understand physics? So first of all, what will happen is that it will question the causality, the principle, or the phenomena of causality. What will it say? The cause and effect phenomena. So it will violate the cause and effect phenomena. So if you can travel faster than light, then you can reach to the effect before the cause has happened, right? So you're traveling faster than light. The light has reached only till this point. So you can reach to the effect before the cause has actually happened. Now this is something which is very contrary to what we understand. The cause has to happen first and then the effect will happen. But since we are traveling faster than light, we can see the effect before the cause has happened. Then we can change our activity so that that effect in itself will not happen. So this is kind of a confusion which will get created if such kind of particles start existing in universe. But then the scientists are saying that it is dominated by such particles, right? So that is something which is very interesting with respect to violation of the causality. Now, second thing which is interesting is that we saw that when you increase the speed, right, the mass also keeps on increasing. But what happens with tachyons is that if you give more and more energy, the speed will start reducing. So it's again contrary to what will happen to the normal particle. All right, so that is there. It has imaginary mass. It does not have the mass as we understand, right? And we do not know what will happen to time dilation, right? Time dilation is again something which will we know that when the speed increases, the time will start moving slowly. But what will happen in case of tachyons? How will they impact the relationship between the speed and the time and all those things? So these are the interesting things. These are the things which are going to be questioned by the scientist, right? Now these tachyons, why are they being explored so much? They definitely have some kind of importance. They have their relevance or they have their importance in solving questions with respect to the quantum physics. Okay, so there are so many unanswered questions in these domains. So tachyons can be one of the solutions to them. So quantum physics is a field which will benefit from such particles. We might understand more and more about dark energy, something which is responsible for the expansion of the universe, right? So maybe tachyons can be used in understanding what exactly is dark energy. We might also better understand the string theory which is going beyond the theory of relativity. Obviously, theory of relativity is not perfect, right? We are still looking at several other theories, several other combinations of it. So tachyons might help us come up with a better theory which explains the universe in a better manner. So that is the importance, that is the relevance of tachyons as the particles. Okay. So in this particular thing, we have studied various things about tachyons. We have seen how does it goes against the theory of relativity and what all might be the applications of tachyons in the coming future. The topic of discussion now is the yellow phosphorus. So yellow phosphorus, it was in news because people in some of the states have fallen ill because accidentally they have consumed these rat poison, which is having yellow phosphorus. So the question arises, obviously, like this is such a bad thing that people are not aware enough, or these kind of rat poisons are so easily available that people, especially children, can come in contact of that. But the question, when such kind of a question comes or such kind of a news comes in the newspaper, we would just see, oh, this is very normal news. The UPSC might not ask some questions in it, but UPSC can ask. There are two important things over here. One, of course, the UPSC can ask questions about phosphorus, especially about yellow phosphorus, and is there any other kind of phosphorus as well. It can also ask questions about how it is being treated. That is why this particular news was there. So let's understand the characteristics of phosphorus first, right, as an element, and then we'll move on how it is being treated. So if we look at phosphorus, the characteristics are that this is first of all a soft element. Okay, so it is soft, it is malleable, right? So it can be drawn into sheets. So it is malleable, right? Now what is important over here is that you have to understand that this phosphorus is insoluble in water. So this is a very important line, right, which can be there in your prelims examination. So this is insoluble in water, but this is soluble in carbon disulfide. All right, this is soluble in carbon disulfide. So this is something which you definitely have to remember with respect to your prelims examination. This might be one of the statements in the prelims examination. All right, that is there. So another thing is that it becomes brittle. The phosphorus becomes brittle when it is cooled down below the melting point. All right, it is cooled down below the melting point, right? So that is there. So these are the basic characteristics of physical characteristics of phosphorus. With respect to its chemical characteristics, it's highly inflammable. It can catch fire, especially with respect to the yellow phosphorus. So it's highly inflammable and it can catch fire, even in the air, right? So that is one of the important characteristics. So you have to remember that this is insoluble in water, soluble in carbon dioxide, and it can catch fire. So with respect to the chemical and the physical properties, this is something which you need to remember. But more importantly, let's try to understand how do we obtain phosphorus. Like for example, we have to use this phosphorus in the industrial purposes. So how do we obtain it? So the first thing is that this phosphorus is rarely available as pure form. Right, we cannot get, because this is so reactive, we won't get it in a pure form. So thing is that they are present in the rocks, which are phosphate based rocks. That is the first thing. So basically we have to go for the mining process. So we'll find out these rocks which are phosphate based rock, we'll go for the mining process, and then when we have mined it, then we will go for this process of beneficiation. Okay, we'll go for the process of beneficiation. Now what is beneficiation? Beneficiation is basically crushing down, right? The mined material that we have got, we will crush it down to remove the phosphorus part and the other impurities. Now this phosphorus part will be mixed with silicon, right? It will be mixed with silica, and it will be sent to the process of calcination. Right, it will be sent to the process of calcination. What is calcination? It is like heating this particular mixture of phosphorus and silica at a very high temperature to convert it into phosphoric acid. So this is like heating at a very high temperature, and this will ultimately convert into phosphoric acid. Now to get the actual phosphorus, the elemental phosphorus, we have to go for the process of reduction. Now this reduction can happen based on, we can use carbon over here. Now from here we will get the actual elemental phosphorus. Now if you heat it more and more, we can get the usable format, which is the yellow phosphorus. Right, that is what we get. So this is the entire process from the mining to the beneficiation to calcination, and then reduction and getting the yellow phosphorus. Now if you heat this yellow phosphorus more and more, we can get the versions of red phosphorus and black phosphorus. The question is, what is red phosphorus and what is black phosphorus now? So let's understand the allotropes of phosphorus. So these are allotropes. These are the allotropes of phosphorus. The first one, as we have already seen, is the yellow phosphorus. The second one is a red phosphorus. The third one is the black phosphorus. All right. Now let's understand the characteristics. Allotropes are basically, what are these? These are having similar similar characteristics, in terms of their chemical composition. They are similar, but in terms of their physical arrangement of the atoms, they differ. Okay, so they are different structures of the same compound, same element. Okay, so when we talk about yellow phosphorus, this is highly unstable. Why unstable? Because it is very reactive. Okay, it will react, as we talked about, it will react even in the air, right? Open air. And the structure is it is made up of P4 atoms, and the structure is tetrahedral. All right, the structure is tetrahedral. That is something which is there with respect to yellow phosphorus. Now let's talk about red phosphorus. So red phosphorus is comparatively more stable. When we compare it to the yellow phosphorus, they're comparatively more stable. They will not simply react in air, right? And that is why this is being used, as you would know, in the matchstick. All right, in the matchstick it is being used. Earlier we used to we used yellow phosphorus, but because it was dangerous, now we have shifted to red phosphorus in the matchstick, right? That is there. With respect to structure, if you talk about it, then red phosphorus has a complex structure, right? It has this structure which is in a chain of phosphorus atoms. So the structure over here is more complex when compared to the yellow phosphorus. It's like a chain of phosphorus atoms. Right, so that is there. Now when we talk about the black phosphorus, it is even more stable when compared to red phosphorus. All right, if you heat red phosphorus more and more, if you heat yellow phosphorus more and more, you will find black phosphorus. This is more and more stable, and with respect to the structure, this is very similar to a layered structure. So it is very similar to graphene. Right, it's very similar to graphene. So it has a layered structure of phosphorus, much more stable and much less reactive when compared to these the other allotropes of phosphorus. So that is the basic information you need to have about phosphorus, which might be one of the statements in the prelims examination. Now let's come to the uses of phosphorus. So obviously, as we talked about, they are used for phosphoric acid, right? That is the first use. Now phosphoric acid can be used in multiple industries, right? Phosphorus can be used for detergent products, right? That is there. It can be used as a fire hydrant as well, fire retardant, right? That is also one of the uses of phosphorus. So in detergents, in fire retardants, right? That is something which phosphorus can be used. Then it has its use in the military sphere as well. It can be used as smoke screens, right? It can be used as smoke screens, but then this use has been slightly under control because it has negative impact, of course, on the humans. So as we have talked about, phosphorus, especially the yellow phosphorus, is very toxic, right? And therefore this smoke screen is also something which is not used much. Okay, so those are the uses of phosphorus which can come in the examination. Now let's talk about the treatment, which is why this particular thing was in news. Okay, initially whenever people would get this particular problem, the only solution which was available was the liver transplant. Okay, the only solution available was liver transplant, because phosphorus has a huge impact on the liver. It damages the liver, and therefore, directly transplanting the liver and all those things was the only solution available. But recently, this was in news because scientists have started using the plasma exchange treatment. They have started using the plasma exchange treatment. So plasma is a component of the blood, right, that we already know, along with RBCs and WBCs. That is something we already know. So what happens is that the patient's blood is being taken out, right? The plasma and the other components are separated. This plasma is being removed, it's being thrown away, and then a new plasma from the donor person is added to this particular RBCs and WBCs, and this fresh blood is being flown back again to the patient. Okay, so this particular technology is much more cheaper because liver transplant is has its own issues. We already know that in terms of organ donation, we Indians are lagging behind, right? We have this particular huge amount of supply deficiency of organs, right? That is there. Then obviously the body might not react properly to the liver transplant. So we have this particular solution of plasma treatment, plasma exchange treatment, right? So this is a cheaper alternative and a much safer one when compared to the liver transplant. So these are the things which are important from the perspective of this particular news. So we saw the various versions of phosphorus, the characteristics of phosphorus, and what are the uses, and how can we treat, what are the methods which are being used by the people, by the doctors to treat someone suffering from this kind of problem, right? Now the topic of discussion is ethylene oxide. This is in news because several countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, US, Nepal have started rejecting Indian spices, and India is one of the biggest exporter of spices. This is one of the very important products that we export, and since these countries which are the consumers of spices, if they are rejecting it, so it's a huge blow on the Indian economy. Now the question arises, why exactly are they rejecting it? So they're saying that Indian spices have been found to have this particular thing, ethylene oxide, and ethylene oxide is a problematic thing because it causes cancer. So they say that ethylene oxide is carcinogenic, right? That is what they say. They say that it is being used in the pesticides. So let's have a look at the entire news over here, and most importantly, what can come from the examination's perspective. So you need to know what exactly is ethylene oxide, how do we create ethylene oxide, what is the process of its creation, what are the characteristics of ethylene oxide as a as a product, right? So first of all, ethylene oxide is C2H4, right? It is C2H4O, that is the compound name. It is actually gas at the room temperature. At the room temperature, this is going to be a gas. Now we have to understand that this is a very strong, high oxidizing agent. It's a very strong oxidizing agent, right? That is something which we have to see. It is highly soluble in water, right? It is highly soluble in water. and the point that we have to note, and it is highly flammable as well. So these are the characteristics of ethylene oxide that we definitely have to understand. So it is highly it is a very strong oxidizing agent. That is why it is highly reactive as well, right, this particular compound. So it's very reactive oxidizing agent, soluble in water, and flammable characteristics, right. Now let's understand how do we create ethylene oxide. So this can be created, one, by the direct oxidation method. Direct oxidation method, right, that is one way of creating it. So how this is let's say we have ethylene available. So ethylene is something which we can get from, you know, the fractional distillation of the crude oil that we get. So from there we can get so many carbon and hydrogen compounds, right. So this ethylene is being undergone this process of direct oxidation, and therefore we can get the ethylene oxide. And then the second process is the chlorohydrin process. The chlorohydrin process, all right, which is, you know, when you react ethylene with HOCl, which is hypochlorous acid. This is hypochlorous acid. So when you react ethylene with HOCl, it forms a compound which can be further converted into ethylene oxide. So these are the two processes which are there for the production of ethylene oxide. That is something which we have to remember. Now let's talk about why are we producing this particular ethylene oxide? What is the use? What is the application of ethylene oxide? So the uses, when it comes to, first of all, why was it in news? It was in news because this is being used as the sterilization agent or sterilizing agent in the spices. Okay, so we want to ensure that the spices do not develop these fungi, these bacteria and everything, so that they are not spoiled. We want to increase the lifespan of the spices. To ensure that, we are using ethylene oxide in some quantities below a particular limit, and that is being used as sterilizing agent. That is why it was being used in the Indian spices as well, right. But beyond a limit, it acts as a pesticide. It has toxin effects as well, and also it has these carcinogenic effect as well. So that is why this became a issue with other countries. So it is there with the with respect to sterilizing agent. Second, it can be used to produce antifreeze products. It can be used to produce antifreeze products, right, which is specifically ethylene glycol. Right, so ethylene glycol is being used as coolant in several industries. So to get ethylene glycol, we can use ethylene oxide. That is one of the important use of ethylene oxide. Third very relevant use of ethylene oxide is the use to create wrinkle-free textiles. Right, so how does it create it? So basically these textiles have fibers. Now when you treat it with ethylene oxide, these fibers develop bonds between them, right, and therefore they will not be displaced, and therefore wrinkles will not happen. So these ethylene oxide helps in building bonds between the fibers of the textile, and therefore they are not displaced, and therefore they will not create this particular wrinkle. All right, then it also has uses in the industries like detergent industries and the pharmaceutical industries as well. Right. So this is what we have to understand with respect to the uses of ethylene oxide. Now let's come to the impact. One impact we already know, that this is a carcinogenic compound. So it can, after beyond a limit, it can lead to cancers, right. It is being sometimes used as pesticides as well. So of course this is not good for health, right. Third is that this can have respiratory issues, right. This can lead to certain respiratory problems in the human body, and it can even lead to some kind of irritations as well. So overall, this is not a very good compound to be dealing with. So therefore, in the industries, when we are using this particular compound, we have to be very careful how we are using this particular compound. All right. So in this particular thing, we discussed, since ethylene oxide was in news, we talked about the production of ethylene oxide, what are the uses, what are the impacts, you know, and the entire supply chain of ethylene oxide as a compound, right. Now the topic in news is sodium ion battery. It's a very interesting topic, and if you see from the headline itself, it says that scientists have built batteries that can charge in seconds. Now these electronic batteries, if the batteries can be made to charge in seconds, then imagine the amount of change which will happen, or imagine the amount of impact that will be there in the electronic EV industry. Right, because that is the most important problem in the EV industry. You go to the petrol pump, within minute your your tank will be full and you can start your driving. But with what happens with the electric vehicles, you have to you have to charge it for a long period of time, and then only you can use it. So because of that, adoption of EV vehicles are definitely, it's restricted. So that is the question over here. If you can create batteries which can charge in seconds, right, it will completely revolutionize the entire EV industry, and that is where these sodium ion batteries are coming up. Now one more question is there. We already have these batteries, the lithium ion battery, we have other batteries as well. Why do we need sodium as a compound in the battery? Those are the questions which are going to discuss in this particular topic. So before we enter into those questions, let's first of all try to understand the battery technology in a very simple terms. So what is a battery? Battery is basically something which is carrying the energy in the form of chemical energy, right? It is storing energy in the form of chemical energy, and when this is being connected, it converts this particular chemical energy into the electric energy. How does it happen? There are three main components of the battery. One is the anode, the second is the cathode, and the third is the, let's say, the electrolyte, which is there, which connects the anode and the cathode. So we have the electrolyte. All right, so what happens? This anode, now why does a battery function? Because both these anode and cathode are at unstable stage. So anode wants to give the electron to become stable, cathode wants to take the electron to become stable. So anode will give the electrons which will pass through the circuit, all right, and it will be deposited to the cathode, and then anode will give the positive ions. Let's say if this is a lithium ion battery, so the lithium ions, positive lithium ions, will move through the electrolyte to the other side of the battery. This particular thing will complete the chain, right? And then obviously this is basically the chemical reaction. Now what happens is during discharge, and this is during discharge, this is when battery is generating the power, right? When it is converting its chemical energy into electrical energy, right? So what happens is that when we talk about the lithium ion battery and the sodium ion battery, more or less the structure is going to remain the same. This is how the anode will give the electrons, it will give the positive ions, the cathode will receive the electrons and the positive ions, one through the circuit and other through the electrolyte. Let's compare these two as battery solutions. Let's compare a lithium ion battery and the sodium ion battery. So in terms of its anode and cathode, when we are using the lithium ion battery, let's say we are using the lithium ion battery. So what is at the anode? What is at the anode in the lithium ion battery? At the anode we use graphite. Okay, at the anode we use the graphite to store the lithium ions. Okay, but at the anode of the, and what do we do at the cathode when it comes to the lithium ion battery? What is at the cathode? It is lithium cobalt oxide. Okay, lithium cobalt oxide. Now over here you have to understand this cobalt again is a difficult element to get, right? That is one of the issues. But when we go for this sodium ion battery, if we talk about the sodium ion battery, what is at the anode? And here comes the surprising element, or here comes the change which has been made. Okay, so at the anode we are using ultra fine iron sulfide particles. Okay, ultra fine iron sulfide particles, right, which will embedded on carbon and graphene. Carbon embedded on carbon, basically graphene. All right, right. So this is where the change in the anode comes, but it remains more or less same with respect to any battery technology. All right. Now when we talk about the cathode of the sodium ion battery, this is where the real change comes. Usually the cathode and the anode of such kind of batteries are, have particular characteristics. The cathode over here, right, is basically the sodium oxide, layered version of sodium oxide. Okay, layered version of sodium oxide. Now this is derived from a supercapacitor. And that is where the difference comes. Okay, so can you see that the anode is almost similar with respect to any other battery? Like it's more or less similar, but the cathode, the one is derived from the battery technology, the cathode is derived from the supercapacitor technology. What are capacitors? They have huge amount of capacity to store energy and give out energy at a very fast pace. That is the characteristics of capacitors, right? And that is why you saw the news that the sodium ion battery can be charged in seconds, because we are using capacitors over here, right? And not the usual cathode technology. That is what brings a difference, and that is why this particular battery becomes a hybrid version. It becomes what? It becomes a hybrid battery. The sodium ion battery which we have developed now has become a hybrid version of the battery and the capacitors. All right, so this is what is bringing that kind of change in the charging facility. Let's discuss, let's compare the other properties of these two batteries. So first of all, if we take up the lithium ion battery, we see that lithium is a rare element, right? Lithium basically it's a rare element, so it's very costly to get, it's very difficult to get lithium. But then what about sodium? Sodium can be easily obtained from the oceans, from the mining surfaces, right? Every country has almost every country will have these resources of sodium, right? It can be very easily obtained. That is the first thing. That is the first thing which separates these two things. The second thing is that lithium ions are smaller in nature, right? They are small. Okay, and sodium ions are larger, right? Sodium atoms are larger. So what difference it brings is that is why lithium batteries are faster, right, in terms of their charging and discharging, right? They are faster, and that is why these sodium ions were slower in terms of their fast charging and discharging, and that is why they were not promoted so much. But now, since we are creating hybrid batteries, now they will be promoted. Okay, so initially they have this particular problem. Their sodium ions are large, therefore the movement is slow. But because of this large and the slow size of the atoms, you can see that more atoms can be, more lithium ions can be stored in a small amount of space, right? Because they are small. So therefore the energy density will be more of the lithium battery as compared to the sodium battery. Okay, so in terms of energy density, again lithium ion battery is far better than sodium ion battery. But when we come to huge amount of energy storage, so these sodium ion batteries are more stable when compared to the lithium ion batteries. The lithium ion batteries have this problem of thermal runaway, isn't it? They might catch fire as well. They are not that stable, they are not that safe. But sodium ion battery are much more safer, much more stable when compared to the lithium ion battery. And for huge battery storages, if we want huge storage options, then definitely sodium ion battery is the one we should promote. Okay, so that's one thing. That is the basic difference between these two things. Okay, and that is why the sodium ion battery are becoming more and more popular these days. Now the question, what will happen in the future? So basically in the future we are going for these solid electrolytes. That is the first thing, first change which might happen, because these are more stable and safer, right? And but then there will be certain challenges when we talk about the sodium ion battery. The kind of anode material that we have to create for these huge sodium atoms will be an issue. The kind of cathode that we have to use will be an issue. The kind of electrolytes that we have to use for these batteries might be an issue. So these can be the things. In fact, one more advantage of sodium ion battery is their environmental disposal. So they have less problem, but lithium ion batteries definitely have problem with respect to environmental disposal, right? They are not easy to dispose. Correct. So they have environmental consequences. Sodium ion battery, with respect to lithium ion batteries, they have less issues with respect to disposing of the battery. So this is what we had to discuss in this particular sodium ion battery and the lithium ion battery. So we discussed the change which has been brought, what is special in this particular sodium ion battery, and how they are being improved for fast charging, and how they can change the entire EV industry, the entire EV landscape. All right. Now the topic of discussion is pink hydrogen. All right, and you can see that in the table over here, in the news over here, that yes, there is a buzz about green hydrogen, right? We can create green hydrogen through multiple purposes, but then pink hydrogen could be, right, could be one of the most important component of green hydrogen. That is what this particular news says that. So first of all, in this particular news, we will try to analyze what is pink hydrogen, and of course what are the other types of hydrogen. That is what we'll see, and then we'll see the importance of hydrogen as a fuel. Why exactly are we moving towards hydrogen as a fuel? That is something which we'll discuss. What is the advantage, what are the uses of hydrogen as a fuel? So if we see over here, there are 6 types of hydrogens which are mentioned. Okay, so they differ in 2 things. One is the raw material which is being used, the starting material, and second is the process which is being used. All right, in these kinds of hydrogen, the difference comes in these 2 levels. So let's start with the gray hydrogen. So in gray hydrogen, the raw material is the natural gas. So we use the natural gas, and the process is steam reforming. All right. So in this particular process, the natural gas is being reacted with water at a very high temperature and moderate pressure under the nickel as a catalyst. So there is reaction between natural gas and water under very high temperature and moderate pressure under the catalyst of nickel, right? And then we produce the hydrogen gas. That will be known as gray hydrogen. Now, the amount of carbon which will be released in this particular process of steam reforming, if we catch that particular carbon, if we do not allow that particular carbon to leave, if we capture that, when we go for carbon capture in the same process, in the same earlier process, that will become blue hydrogen. Okay, so it's comparatively more sustainable, comparatively less polluting. Okay, greenhouse gases will be released less. Okay, let's move on to the black hydrogen first. So basically over here, the raw material becomes coal and the process becomes gasification. The process becomes gasification. So over here we were using natural gas as the raw material. Now here we are using coal as the raw material. Over there the process was steam reforming, their process is gasification. What is gasification? Gasification is like when we are heating this particular coal at a very limited supply of oxygen, very slowly the syngas is being produced. And this syngas is having, these hydrogen, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide and all those things, and we can separate out the hydrogen. So that is what is known as gasification. Let's move on to yellow hydrogen and the pink hydrogen. So in yellow hydrogen and the pink hydrogen, the process that we use, the raw material is water. Okay. The raw material is water. We are trying to go for the electrolysis process. Okay, the process of electrolysis. All right. And now, if we are powering this electrolysis process with solar energy, this will be yellow hydrogen. If we are powering the same electrolysis process with nuclear energy, this will be the pink hydrogen. So we are using water as the raw material. We are going for the electrolysis process, breaking the water molecule into hydrogen, oxygen, and then using hydrogen and sending oxygen for the industrial purposes, right? So if you are using solar energy for powering the electrolysis process, it will be yellow hydrogen. If you are using the nuclear energy for powering the electrolysis process, it will be pink hydrogen. Now coming to the turquoise hydrogen. So over here, we are trying to use again, what is the raw material? The raw material again becomes natural gas, right? Natural gas is the raw material and the process is pyrolysis. What is pyrolysis? pyrolysis is burning this particular natural gas in the absence of oxygen. Okay, in the absence of oxygen. So pyrolysis, when we burn natural gas in the absence of oxygen, that is known as turquoise hydrogen. So these are the various versions of hydrogen, the way we are producing hydrogen in terms of their changes, in terms of their raw materials, the processes, and the energy that we are using. All right, so that is there. Now let's understand why exactly do we have so much of interest in hydrogen as a fuel. So what are the characteristics of hydrogen as a fuel? The first of all, we already know it's a very clean fuel. When we are using hydrogen as a fuel, let's say in the fuel cells, then what is the byproduct? It is water. There are no greenhouse gases, there are no pollutants which are released, right? So it's a very, very clean fuel, right? It's a renewable source of energy. That is also we know, because we have huge amount of water resources on the earth. Yes, drinkable water is something which is limited, but then water as a compound, as an entity is there on the earth's surface, right? So it's majorly a renewable source of energy. That is one of the most important thing. But when we come to the technical part, the more factual part, it has more energy density. So hydrogen is a very small atom, right? It's a very small element. So it has huge amount of hydrogen can be stored in. Can be stored. It has very less mass, right? So huge amount of hydrogen can be stored. So in terms of its energy to weight ratio, in terms of mass, it has huge amount of energy density. But in terms of volume, the energy density is less. And that is why a huge amount of storage infrastructure is needed for storing the hydrogen. Okay, so this is something which you have to be careful about. So hydrogen has huge amount of energy density when we look at the mass density, but in terms of volumetric density, this is less, and that is why that is one of the negative points also. We need more and more infrastructure for storing hydrogen. Okay, that is there. The fourth benefit of hydrogen is that it is a very versatile fuel. It is a very versatile fuel, right? So it can be used in multiple devices. It can be used in internal combustion engine. It can be used in any such material. It's very easily used in multiple places, right? So that is there. Another difference and the problem with hydrogen is that it can be advantage as well. It is highly flammable. Fine. So this is something which you have to remember. It is highly flammable as well. And the efficiency of using hydrogen. So basically, the hydrogen-based engine can have the efficiency to the extent of 60%, right? Almost around 60-70%. So efficiency is also huge, right? So in terms of efficiency also, hydrogen as a fuel is really good. Now let's talk about why. So these are the reasons why India is taking the advantage or taking the interest in the hydrogen as a fuel. So let's talk about India's plan. What all India is planning. So the first thing is that India has a national hydrogen mission, right? So it has a national green hydrogen mission. India wants to develop as a hydrogen-based economy. So therefore, it has a national green hydrogen mission in which they're trying to generate 5 million metric ton of green hydrogen, right, by the year 2030, right? So that is what they're trying to generate per annum 5 million. This is the capacity that we want to generate per annum, 5 million metric ton of hydrogen by the year 2030. And for that, to ensure that we're creating so much of hydrogen, we are adding 125 gigawatts of renewable energy. 125 gigawatts of renewable energy, right? We are adding just to power the electrolysis process. So this particular hydrogen will be a green hydrogen. It will be produced with the help of electrolysis, and to power this electrolysis process, we are adding 125 gigawatts of renewable energy. So there are two components to this mission, right? The first component is SITE. And SITE stands for Strategic Intervention for Green Hydrogen Transition Program. So SITE stands for Strategic Intervention for Green Hydrogen Transition Program. What is the most important, what is the characteristic of this particular thing? They're trying to give incentives They're trying to give incentives to the companies to establish green hydrogen hubs for the establishment of infrastructure and everything related to green hydrogen. All right, the second component of the mission is ship. Now, these two things are very important from the examination's perspective. They can ask you, they can give you these words, site and ship, and then they can ask you what are they related to. That can be one of the questions. So ship is the another component, which is like strategic hydrogen innovation partnership. It is strategic hydrogen innovation partnership. The main focus of this particular initiative is giving the skills for the development of hydrogen as a fuel. Okay, so this particular mission, which was launched in January 2023, right? So this is where India is, this is how India is targeting, this is how India is moving ahead with respect to its hydrogen as a economy, hydrogen as a fuel thing, right? So that is there. So in this particular thing, since this was a news with respect to pink hydrogen, we saw that how pink hydrogen, which is based, which is using nuclear energy to power the electrolysis process, can be a very important component to ensure that green hydrogen as a fuel can come for India. So green hydrogen can come from renewable energy. Renewable energy could be solar energy, wind energy, it could be nuclear energy as well. So all these things combined together can help us produce more and more green hydrogen. All right. So we understood about various types of hydrogen as a fuel, the characteristics, and about India's plan. Now the topic of discussion is nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome. Now by the word we can first of all find out. Obviously you have the image over here, but then this word, nephrotic or nephro, this is mainly considered with it's seen with things related to kidney. So whenever in the examination you have such kind of a word, you can just search for kidney in the options. Hopefully there is just one option with respect to kidney. So you can search that and maybe that could be the answer. So let's leave and let's move on to this particular thing. So this is a kind of syndrome which is there in news, which is developing in people, and it is there because of mercury in the people's body. Now from where is this mercury coming to the people's body? It is by the use of these fairness cream, the skin lightening creams that we have. Okay, so these fairness cream, the skin lightening creams have mercury in them, right? Heavy metals and especially high levels of mercury, which has toxic effects, right? And it is being found in the blood and the urine. So now let's understand what exactly are the consequences and what exactly are the impact of mercury on the human body like that, right? So what happens is that when you apply these kind of when these kind of creams on the face, they enter the skin, right? Then they would enter the bloodstream. They would enter the bloodstream, right? And once they enter the bloodstream, now over here the role of kidney comes. So what is a kidney? What is the role of kidney? It is there to purify the blood. It is there to remove the waste, right? And protect the important ingredients from moving away, right? So what happens when mercury comes in the human body? The kidney would try to remove it. Okay, the kidney would try to remove it. But what happens is that this mercury, now these kidneys have little filters. They have small filters by the name. They have very small filters which are responsible for removing these kind of things, and this is by the name of glomeruli. Okay, they have little filters by the name of glomeruli. Okay, glomeruli, right? So these filters are what is the use of this? What is the method or what is the process of this filter? Is that they will remove the waste, right? But they will protect the proteins which are needed by the body. So they will protect it. They will bring it back to the bloodstream. They will bring it back to the body because that is being used by the body. That has to be used by the body. But what happens is that when this mercury comes, the functioning of glomeruli gets impacted, right? It can no longer prevent this protein from moving away, and therefore you see a lot of protein content in the urine, right? And therefore the urine becomes has a different color, it becomes translucent, and all those foam and everything starts coming in the urine. And this particular condition of kidney failing to protect the protein from moving out is known as membranous nephropathy. So this condition is known as membranous nephropathy. This is something which you have to remember. All right. So when protein moves out of your body, what happens? Protein is needed for energy. Protein is the building block of the body, right? If it moves out of the body, we will start feeling weak. We'll start feeling fatigued, right? In fact, one of the consequences of these kind of diseases is that the blood pressure increases. There is a lot of swelling in the body, okay, because there is a lot of water retention in the body. So these kind of things start coming up, right? And therefore the humans start facing the issues with respect to this thing. So that is why mercury, now you have to understand that there are so many other chemicals which are there in the news, which might have difficult impact on the human body. For example, parabens are there, sulfates are there, bisphenol A is there. So whenever you read such kind of topics, you have to be very careful. You have to understand that what are the other chemicals, right, which are there in the news and what is their impact on the body. And you can just make a list of those chemicals, right? That is how you have to study anything when you study in the newspapers, right? So this is in this particular thing we discuss the impact or the influence of mercury on the human body, right? The topic of discussion now is Llama 3 and Phi 3 Mini. So from the image, you can see that it's a kind of artificial intelligence based topic, robotics based topic, right? So these Llama 3 and Phi 3 Mini, these are the language models. What are these? These are language models. What is a language model? That is something which we have to see. Now, Llama 3 is a large language model. All right, and Phi 3 Mini is a small language model. By large language model and by small language model, we mean that the amount of data on which they are trained and the amount of parameters, the amount of algorithms that they have. Okay, so this Llama 3 is large language model by Meta AI. So this is by the company Meta, right, which is the parent company of Facebook, the new name of Facebook. And then we have this particular Phi 3 Mini, which is created by Microsoft, right? So in this particular discussion, let us talk about what are language models, how do they function, what are their uses, right? And let's try to understand this entire thing. And we'll see the difference between the large language models and the small language models. All right. So let's see what are these large language models. So as I told you, this is large because of the amount of data that they are trained at and the number of parameters, the algorithms which are present, the algorithms which are being used by these models. Okay. Then they are language models. Okay, so mostly they are there for generating the text. They can generate text, they can generate videos, they can generate images as well. For example, you would have used ChatGPT is one of the major examples of large language models. You would have used Google's Bard also, again another example of large language model. So these are the two famous language models. So it is let's as of now, let's assume that they are there to generate text or work in the dimension of text. Now, before we understand this particular thing and how do they function, let's take the basics of AI and let's see what exactly, how exactly we derive at this particular point. So what is AI? Let's talk about AI, which is artificial intelligence. So it helps machines make decisions in the same manner as humans would do. Okay, in the same process, in the same manner. What is intelligence? Intelligence is basically getting the data, learning about that particular data, trying to find out the algorithms, the reason behind the interconnections, the correlations and the relations between them, and then coming out with solutions and having our own feedback to self-correct. So when we have the result, when we get the feedback, we can self-correct ourselves, right? So that is what intelligence means. Now, when we make the machines capable of doing the same thing, that becomes artificial intelligence. Okay. Now, there are multiple methods, there are multiple ways of making the machine intelligent. One of those ways is machine learning, right? So in machine learning, we do not have to program the machine, they learn on their own. But there are other ways also. So we can provide rules and regulations, we can program the machine. There are AI models which are based on evolutionary algorithms, there are AI models which are based on fuzzy logics. So there are so many other methods of training or making the machine artificially intelligent. And machine learning is one thing wherein the machine learns on itself. You do not have to program it again and again. Okay, that is what is machine learning. Now, to achieve this capability of machine learning, there are several methods. Okay, there are several methods. One of the method is artificial neural network. So one of the method is, what is this? Artificial neural network. That is one of the methods. Okay, there are so many other methods. For example, a support vector, decision tree. There are so many other methods, right? Now, one of the artificial neural network is transformer. One of the designs or one of the type of artificial neural network are transformers. Neural network means, so in let's say for example in our brain also there are neurons, right? There is a network of neuron which fire together to take the decision to do anything. So over here also we have multiple layers of algorithm which will run together to ultimately find out the solution. That's how you can figure out, that's how you can understand it. So one of the artificial neural network is the transformers. Okay, there are other artificial neural network. For example, we have the recurrent neural network, we have the convoluted neural network, we have the generative artificial neural network. So all those kind of neural networks are there. One of them is transformers. Why am I talking about transformers? Is because these large language models are based on such neural networks which are known as transformers. Now we will study that what exactly is the functioning of transformers. Okay, let's study that. So when we talk about transformers, there are three main steps. There are three main steps when we talk about transformers. The first is the attention. I'll talk about each of them. I'll explain what exactly do they mean. So first is the attention, right? Second is the embeddings. Now these keywords, they can definitely be asked in the examination as well, right? Third is the parallel processing. Third is parallel processing. Now let's understand what do these three terms or these three processes mean when we talk about transformers as the neural network. So I'll take an example of a text, right, and we'll see how this is being applicable. So let's say we have a text which says that Sachin Tendulkar was a member of Indian team, right? He scored 100 centuries. Correct? So that is what, let's say this is a statement that we have. This is the data that we are feeding to this particular neural network, feeding to transformers to train it. Now what this will do is, this will first of all find out the keywords from the statement. So that is known as attention. It will focus on few words rather than focusing on the entire statement. So for example, what is the keyword? First keyword is of course Sachin Tendulkar. It will cut was a member of, no need of it. Then second keyword is Indian team. He scored, no need of it, 100 centuries. Third keyword. So this particular transformer will break this statement and will find out the keywords. That is known as attention. Okay. So even if I give you these three words, it more or less makes sense what I'm trying to say. Sachin Tendulkar, Indian team, 100 centuries. It more or less makes the sense. Okay. Now it goes for embedding. These three keywords, right? They will be converted into numericals, or you can call it codes. Now these are the codes which are being understood by the machines, right? So these keywords, first of all, it will focus on some of the most important keywords. Then it will convert those keywords into codes. All right, that is there. Now, the third characteristics of transformer is that it will not go from here and then find out one keyword, other keyword like that. It will work on the entire statement together. So that is what is known as parallel processing. So it will work on the entire statement together at one time itself. Okay, so that is known as parallel processing. Right, so these are the three things. This is how transformers function. Now what will happen, how does it function exactly? Now let's say let's take the example of ChatGPT, and you're giving this particular prompt to it ki, tell me who was Sachin Tendulkar and what are his accomplishments. Okay, that is the prompt that you are giving to this particular let's assume ChatGPT. Okay, so now in this question also, in this prompt also, you have these words like Sachin Tendulkar, accomplishments, who was Sachin Tendulkar, right? So since it is being trained on certain algorithms, it will try to match. So Sachin Tendulkar is matching, and the data it is being trained on is also matching with Sachin Tendulkar. So it will give this particular information. Who was Sachin Tendulkar? He was the member of Indian team. What are his accomplishments? So he scored 100 centuries. Right? So it will match the prompt and the data and then give you the answer. That is how it will generate the text. That is what is known as large language models, which are functioning, which are working on textual things. Right? That is there. Now, that is how the entire functioning of the large language model functions. Okay, now in this particular thing, we have two language models. One is the LLMs, right? One is the Llama 3, which is a large language model. So it is trained on huge amount of parameters, billions and billions of parameters, right? That is how it is being trained. And then we have a small language model, which is Phi 3. This is just trained on 3.8 billion parameters. It is definitely trained on more such parameters. The large language model means huge amount of parameters. What are these parameters? These parameters are, let's say, the algorithms, the programming which is being done, the data sets, right, which is being used to train this particular thing. Okay, so that is the difference. Now, why do we need to create these small language models? Right, so you have to understand these large language models can go for complex tasks because they have huge amount of data, but these models can go for a specific task only. So for example, we can have a small language model for the healthcare industry. We can have a small language model for the automobile industry or the transportation industry. Okay, that is there. So when we have to really solve the problem in the healthcare industry only, we can use these models and get more specific answers, right? So in terms of healthcare industry, they will give you better answers when compared to this, because this will give you a more general answers. But if the problem is very complex, for example, we have to relate the healthcare industry with the logistics industry, with the let's say any other industry. So if you have to relate all those things, then you can only use the large language models because it will not have the data. But if you only have to ask specific questions about the healthcare industry, then this will be a better model to follow, right? In terms of speed, this will obviously be slightly slow because it has huge amount of parameters to take care of. It has huge amount of data under it, right? This will be relatively faster, right? That is there. Now, in terms of privacy, because they are being trained on data, tell me which model will have more privacy issues. Of course, this particular model, which is Llama 3, because it is having huge amount of data, therefore the privacy issue will be huge over there. And this particular model, which is Phi 3 mini, obviously it is being trained on less amount of data, so less privacy breaches are expected out of it, right? So this is where these two language models comes up. There is industry for both, there is utility for both these models. They have different uses, and therefore, as and when the AI as a system, AI as an industry moves forward, we will see more and more such language models to be created. Okay, so that's all for this topic. We talked about the language models. What exactly is a language model? How does it function? What is a transformer? What are the three processes? How does it process anything, right? And what is the difference between a large and a small language model in terms of their components and in terms of their usability? So this is how we finish off this particular topic. So in this entire session of recitals in depth, we have talked about multiple topics, 10, 11 topics, in which we went into the depth of it. We understood the concept, we understood the supply chain, we understood the uses and the impacts of it, and specifically focusing on questions which might come in the examination. So that's how we have covered the entire science and tech portion of the recitals. Thank you.